That's good. I come to a meeting up here, the Young Men's Business Club, and yes, it's very ironically named, on Mondays. And during football season, I got to see the quarterback club. And their new members always stand out in the lobby wearing little beanies. I make this promise as your president. I will never make you wear headwear. Although they did look cool. We have an amazing season scheduled for everybody. Today, Garth Glissman, we loved him last year. We're going to love him again this year. We have on next week, Lenny Acuff, the new coach at Sanford. You talk about a basketball lifer. He is a basketball lifer. Then on the 16th, we have the Birmingham Tip-Off Classic at Lakeshore. You're going to be hearing a lot more about Lakeshore today and throughout their partner, Lakeshore Foundation. If you're not familiar, Lakeshore Foundation, among other things, is one of the prep centers for our Paralympic athletes. Their wheelchair
is none. And so we're going to be helping raise money for the Tip-Off Foundation. We have been bugging you about that. And we also need people to volunteer for the weekend of the 16th as they host feasts throughout the United States. For wheelchair
This is Paulo.
Where?
See my moves.
On the 19th, we have
Let's go on.
Church of Alabama, y'all. On the 22nd, we will have our annual Squadron Night. The Squadron puts on a not just a Squadron game. There's always something going on. Here's hanging, nice evening, basketball there with Senator.
It's okay.
on February we have Stephen Pearl. Kennedy for change, not.
So we'll ask you before you has to be on the NCAA or wherever the Blazers. Get a Blazers, get the up this year. Go Blazers. On February 23rd, Jake Berger, Martin Charles McFarland will be with us for our ankle Leinster for the NCAA selection committee. We have one day to be determined. We're working on that and let you know. Flag once you I looked as I think I'm the first person to be dumb enough. I'd be honored to be present for 4 turns.
Can you hear me? It is.
And then y'all need to step up because that shows a serious lack of leadership.
We have a really good schedule. We had a really good meeting today planned. I was so excited. They said, why you do everybody do I build up with the hayes of the highways, knocking on the doors, bringing your friends to Birmingham Tip-Off Club. This is a wonderful chance. You get to tell people this is a wonderful chance to fellowship and wonderful speakers. And we're going to be working on some really cool things this year with the Life Foundation. So, and all that falls in all, I will call up Mike Watson, who will get us the invocation and pledge of allegiance.
Sorry about that. I must smack Scott. Can't do it.
Most gracious, O loving Lord, we pray that your reminding presence you'd be with us as we gather in this Tip-Off Club today. We thank you, Father, for all blessing you give us, and we thank you for the joy of sports and athletics, and particularly for basketball, which means much to all of us in this land. We learned so much playing together, competing with each other, and we pray that this sport would somehow or another, help this sport, help the young people of this country and the Rock area and Orient Sea and Beach to have lives that are richer and finer and better. Help us be a part of that in some very significant way. We ask you to be with us in our family.
To bless our time together today, we ask you to bless those who are coming to the teacher, the benefit your grace and your goodness. Thank you for the food we have received. We thank you for those who have prepared it. And we ask you to be with all a very special way. For we pray this in your holy name. Amen. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
And now, introduction, but I'm going to introduce my favorite writer writing in this town right now, and for a long time. He was early today.
I'm trying to see if I can beat the host of the land speed record and get in here to the club on time this year. You know, Nate usually cuts the light from practice. Said he'll do that again in a few weeks, so we'll see what kind of
Time.
power he gets on the team. Now, who that says being here, all right? Don't show up here like a Kentucky basketball team show after tough lunch. All right? We're going to get to the big Blue Nation in a minute. Nation. This is on.
Yeah.
I'll say that before January 1st, 2026, the last time Alabama faced an undefeated #1 Indiana University team in the postseason, they took the Hoosiers to the wire. So the conclusion, after what we witnessed in the Rose Bowl, is never send the Alabama football team to do the Alabama basketball team job. Speaking of which, as you all know, as Sheldon highlighted in the highlights, Alabama did beat Kentucky on Saturday. Was anyone surprised? Was anyone surprised? I'm taking a roll is that from Alabama over Kentucky. Do you know that until this streak started the year, Alabama had never beat Kentucky more than twice in a row?
Yep.
You know what the record is for a team beating Kentucky in consecutive meetings? Anyone want to take a guess? No.
No, more than that.
In the SEC.
I want to give you a test. Do I have to remind you where I sent my sons to school? The Gators. 7 straight. They beat Kentucky from 2004 to 2008.
And as you may remember, there were 2 national championships back-to-back won by the Gators in that stretch. So obviously they were the best team in the country, not just in the SEC at that time. There's one other team that has won 7 straight games in its history over Kentucky. It's a team whose football team decided to take the ball to go home for the most season. You want to take a guess? That's right. They won 7 straight or up from 1936 to 1942. And the full set the Alberta is Senator Hoblet in Kentucky won 6 straight over Kentucky. Actually, 1918 to 21. Indiana, from 1925 to 1943, won 6. That was so long ago. That was before Norman Dale.
This is a tip-off club. All right. Now, in the SEC, this is also interesting because, you know, I like to bring a lot of fun facts. When I come here, all right, let's see. SEC schools, longest streaks. We already said Florida. One school has won 5 straight over Kentucky. Anybody want to take a guess? Who said Tennessee? You want to guess what era it was, Dick? The 2 star players for the Volunteers? Their names rhymed. Scotty got it right off the bat. Bernie and Ernie, that was in the 70s, of course. Vanderbilt, interestingly, twice has won 4 straight over Kentucky, and now Alabama has won 4 in a row. But that is the longest streak by an SEC team over the Wildcats since Florida back in 2004 to 2008. And you have to appreciate Nate Oates. Not only did Alabama beat Kentucky for the fourth straight time, have you noticed the margins in those games? In order, starting with the first game last year. 5 points, 13 points, 27 points, and 15 points on Saturday. So Alabama's not just beating Kentucky. Alabama is beating Kentucky up. And the big boohoo nation is none too happy about it, as you can imagine. And now they're very unhappy and wondering why, when John Calipari left and went to Arkansas, they didn't throw a bigger bag at Nate Oates to try to get him to Lexington. What I have to say to that? Boo-hoo. But you also have to appreciate Nate Oates after that game. Did you see the post game? Did you see his interview? Did you see him throwing shade at Mark Pope, talking about, in our study, we realized they weren't a very good passing team. And yeah, in bye games against non-power conference teams, yeah, they might have had 27 assists. But then when we looked at their games against high major opponents, they had many fewer assists than 27. So we knew when the ball went in the post, it wasn't coming out of the post. It was going to the basket. And I don't know if Nate did this intentionally or not. But me being, somewhat snarky at times, you may have noticed, it seemed to me like he was throwing shade towards Lexington, Kentucky. But as I tweeted on Saturday, Alabama having a better basketball coach, a better basketball team, and a better basketball program than Kentucky is no longer a stop the presses moment. Can we agree on that? Can we agree on that? Thank you. All right. That's enough for that. Now, we're going to talk to someone who knows a lot about helping young people, including in the sport of basketball. She is the Chief of Programs and Special Projects for the Lakeshore Foundation. She's responsible for the development, implementation, and management of the programs of physical activity, as well as the membership programs, which annually serve thousands of individuals with physical disabilities and chronic health conditions in the Birmingham area. She's a 1994 graduate of the University of Dayton, where they also love their basketball, as we know. If you've ever been to the First Four, you know what I'm talking about. Were you there at the first Four with UAB? I was not. Shame on you. Shame on you, Scotty Coles. I'm proud to say I was there. It didn't last very long, as you remember. Jen she's worked for the mayor's office in Baltimore, the Kennedy Krieger Institute, but fortunately for us, in the year 2000, she moved to Birmingham to work for the Lakeshore Foundation. She's worked in development, special events, and communications there since 2000, and this is a really cool fun fact. She has served as the communications volunteer for Team USA at 5 different Paralympic Games from 2012 in London to 2020 in Tokyo. Let's say hello to Jen Allred.
Thanks, everyone. Before I get started today, I want to cue up a quick video to tell you a little bit about Lakeshore, and then we'll dive into Lakeshore and wheelchair basketball.
I'm John Kemp, President and CEO of Lakeshore Foundation. Lakeshore has a long history of excellence and innovation. I'd like to take you back to our roots to give you a better understanding of who we are, what we do, and why we do it. Back in 1923, Robert Jemison donated the property that Lakeshore sits on today to be the home of the Jefferson Tuberculosis Sanatorium. This property operated as the sanatorium until the need for those facilities ended in the early 1970s. Then, in 1973, Lakeshore Rehabilitation Hospital opened, taking the sanatorium's place. The head of physical medicine and rehabilitation at UAB, who is also the director of Spain Rehab, can be considered as the man behind the vision of Lakeshore Foundation, John Miller III. In his document, the Certificate of Need for Lakeshore Hospital, there's a line which is pretty amazing. It says, this would be a local site, and local support would permit participation in worldwide competitive sports such as the Paralympic Games. This was in 1973, a time when hardly anybody in this country was even thinking about the Paralympic Games. So from the very early days, this idea of not only rehabilitation at the hospital, but of using sport and physical activity to improve lives was an integral part of who we are and what we do. In 1974, Mary Lou Humphreys and Sis Turkoff started the Birmingham Chariots, a wheelchair basketball team that would allow local people and people being discharged from Lakeshore Hospital the opportunity to stay physically active. One of the players on the team who'd been a patient at Lakeshore Rehab was Michael Stevens. Mike eventually became administrator of Lakeshore Hospital and made a strong commitment that physical activity was going to be an important part of the experience at Lakeshore Rehab Hospital. At that time, the board of Lakeshore Hospital realized that those community-based programs needed their own home. So the board of Lakeshore Hospital set up a separate organization known as Lakeshore Foundation in October 1984. They gave the foundation $1 million and said it needed its own staff dedicated to the work of the foundation. So they authorized 3 positions: a president, an administrator, and a fundraiser. Jeff Underwood was the first president of Lakeshore, serving for 30 years from 1991 to 2021. During his time, Lakeshore experienced massive growth, expanding from 3 to well over 100 staff members, and now provides more than 90 weekly classes, programs, and sports opportunities for members. Turning a new page in our history, the Paralympic Games were held in Atlanta in 1996. Lakeshore stepped up and said to the United States Olympic Committee at the time, "We can be a leader and we can help train America's Paralympic athletes." Prior to the Games, we housed and hosted training camps for U.S. and international athletes. We also worked with the city of Atlanta to create greater disability access and inclusion at the Games. Because of our commitment to the Paralympic movement, in 2003, we earned the distinction as the first duly designated U.S. Olympic and Paralympic training site. Since 2003, we have trained hundreds of athletes, including over 100 Paralympic medalists. We were also integral in the USOC changing its name from the United States Olympic Committee to the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, the USOPC, in 2019. Another thing that we're very proud of, and we continue to do today, is our Veterans Program. When the program first began in 2006, it was called Lima Foxtrot Injured Military Programs, and it focused on using adapted sports and recreation to re-engage servicemen and women who had acquired disabilities during the post-9/11 conflicts back into life, family, and community. Now we are very proud to continue to serve veterans by providing free Lakeshore memberships to any military veteran with or without a disability and their family. Another very significant activity for us was the partnership we established with Apple. Apple was looking to upgrade the activity tracker on the Apple Watch to make sure that a wheelchair user could track their pushes. Previously, that feature only allowed people to track their steps. After testing the new technology with staff and members at Lakeshore, Apple released the next generation Apple Watch that would allow wheelchair users to track their pushes. Over time, we recognized that we could expand our work and our influences in new spaces. Additionally, if we were really concerned about the health and well-being of people, we had to think about nutrition and mindfulness. So we started to include a broader range of health promotion programs. We established partnerships with educational institutions and organizations that allowed us to expand our research, translate the knowledge gained, and share it with individuals and communities near and far. Our work in advocacy and community health is directly related to this expanded vision. One of the newest pieces of our vision is the Sports Science and Performance Center. Through the Sports Science and Performance Center, we are closing the equity gap for disabled athletes by providing comprehensive sports performance services and advancing sports science research. In everything we have done and continue to do, we are focused on creating accessible and inclusive spaces. We have taken great care to design our campus so that the physical environment is not a barrier to the people who visit. We've embraced and applied universal design, and we are proud to promote disability access and inclusion for all other organizations as well. The responsibility of a leader is to lead, and we try to do that by identifying and filling the gaps. We must continue to speak out, support, directly provide, equip others, promote inclusivity, look out for our staff, and do everything that we can do as an organization to work alongside people with disabilities and ensure a more accessible and inclusive society.
John Kemp. That video does a great job of giving you a glimpse at all that Lakeshore does, which as Kevin mentioned, I've been there for 25 years, and every day I learn about something new that we're doing. It astounds me to see thousands of individuals coming through our door daily, participating in those 90 classes. We experience more than 10,000 visits a month to our building by our members alone. If you amplify that number with the national teams that are coming in, we are seeing over 150,000 visits a year just to our campus. And we're so proud to bring so many people to Birmingham to let them experience what a great community this is. We have been so thrilled to be working with the Tip-Off Club. And as we've been having so many members with the group come out to Lakeshore, they've asked us some great questions about wheelchair basketball. What is wheelchair basketball? We love basketball, but help us understand a little bit more about it. The great news is there's not too much to tell you because wheelchair basketball is basketball, and it requires very minor rules modifications. The biggest thing to think about when you all come out to the Pioneer Classic, January 16th through the 19th, is to remember that the chairs that our athletes use for sports are considered part of their body. So when you think about fouls in basketball, think about that chair being part of the foul. So very straightforward. When you think about traveling in basketball and taking those steps that I have to say, it feels like everybody takes now. But, as you're taking those steps in wheelchair basketball, it's 2 pushes and you dribble. So that is a traveling call. Again, very straightforward. The timeouts, the distance, all the same. We play on a 10-foot hoop, except for our little guys that are playing on an 8.5-foot hoop. They are under the age of 12 and playing in a preparatory league the same way they would out in our community centers in Birmingham. So as you think about what is different about wheelchair basketball, very, very little. Lakeshore is a huge proponent of basketball. As that video shares, it is at the core of what we do. We've been doing it really well since the 70s. We're the home to that prep team that I mentioned. Those are for children that are under the age of 12 who are playing on our teams. We, and you will meet one of our kind of prep into varsity players here in just a minute. We have a varsity team. Those are for children who are 21 years and younger in a high school program in the state of Alabama. We do have some kids that are coming from a greater distance as well. The Lakeshore Lakers are the 3-time back-to-back national champions. They are only the 2nd team in the National Wheelchair Basketball Association history to have that honor. So incredible job by the Lakers. We also have a women's division team. The women's division brings in athletes from Alabama and frankly across the nation that are playing on our team. They competed this past weekend and finished in 2nd. They lost an overtime heartbreaker to Charlotte. And again, Maddie, that you'll meet, was a member of that team this weekend. We also have an adult team that plays for us. They began, as you saw in that video, as the Chariots today. They are the Lakeshore Storm. They are a team that brings together those age groups. It's typically athletes that have graduated from college or out in the community who are playing ball. The age range for that team goes anywhere from 18 up to athletes that are well into their 60s who are still balling all the time. So Lakeshore's got tons of basketball going on all the time. Speaking of basketball going on all the time, as the video showed, we're an Olympic and Paralympic training site. We started off January really busy. We have welcomed in the USA Women's Wheelchair Basketball Tryout Camp. There are 30 women at Lakeshore right now vying for 20 spots to represent the United States at the World Championships. Hoover's Jen Jackson is amongst those 30 hopefuls to make that team. They'll select tomorrow night. Tryout, that selection camp is actually open to the public, so if you'd like to come out and watch some of the women's basketball, I highly encourage you to. It is very high-level basketball, and you will get sucked in really quickly to enjoying it. Most notably, what we can say to you is thank you. We really have to extend an incredible thanks to our board member and your member, Greg Johnston. Greg, when he joined this club, recognized that there was such a love of basketball here, but an opportunity for wheelchair basketball to make the club's love and passion for the sport even more robust. So thank you, Greg, for doing that. Thank you, John Kemp, who you met through our video. John is an enthusiastic and visionary leader who pushes us all to be excellent. He loves sports. He was sharing with us this morning that he was a manager for his high school basketball team. He loves sports from a young age, and so to get to lead our sports programs has been a blessing for us and a blessing for Birmingham and the greater sports community. So thank you, John. And I also would be remiss if not to recognize our athletic director, Kevin Orr. Kevin played basketball at the University of Illinois. He is also a Paralympic athlete in the sport of track. And so, again, passionate athletic direction from somebody who has lived it himself and is out there all the time. Kevin's job is to be an administrator, but every single day he's out on the court because he can't help himself. And he loves to be out there meeting kids where they are and getting them involved in sport. But truly, we have so much opportunity, but we cannot do what we do without support. And so we are so grateful to you for laying that foundation, for helping us tell our story. And we know that with your support, the Tip-Off Club Classic in January will be the best ever, and we'll have more and more opportunity. My last piece up here today, I get to do something which is neat for us. We, for the first time, have the opportunity to name the Player of the Week. As I know that y'all have named a Player of the Week every week, and this week we are honored that one of our athletes, Maddie Etheridge, is your choice for the Player of the Week. Maddie is a high school senior who is going on to the University of Alabama to study psychology, and she has been signed by the University of Alabama to play on their women's team. So I want to introduce Maddie and have you join me in congratulating her for being recognized as the Player of the Week. Basketball all weekend long, as I mentioned. She plays on our varsity team. She plays on our women's team. She rode back in the car and slept, got up this morning, got dressed, and came here. So congratulations, Maddie. I'll let you say a few words to the group.
Thank you so much for nominating me. Sorry, I'm really nervous. I'm like, but thank you so much for nominating me. I feel like Lakeshore has helped me a lot. Recently, when I was growing up, I never saw, people like me with disabilities, and then I found Lakeshore. When I was younger, I don't know how old I was, but when I was younger, I found Lakeshore, and so then I came back to Lakeshore when I got older, and then recently, it's just, been, a new adventure in my life, where I made new friends, I learned so many things, I have so many opportunities to travel and do all these things that I've always wanted to do. So I'm truly, truly thankful for that. And I'm truly, truly thankful for nominating me to be here. Sorry, I'm really sorry. But yeah, I'm truly, truly thankful for being here and to be nominated to be one of your people to be nominated by. Sorry, I couldn't think of anything. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank y'all. I'm glad that you had the opportunity to meet Maddie. And again, there are flyers on your tables about the Tip-Off Club Classic. There are volunteer opportunities. Some of those are on the table. Some of those are throughout the event. So you don't have to have any sports-specific knowledge. We would love to see you out there. We'll also have a breakfast for the club that Saturday morning at 9 at our facility. So please come out, cheer on the Lakeshore teams, cheer on the teams from across the country, and show them why the Tip-Off Club is such a special part of Birmingham. Thank y'all.
Jen, thank you so much. Thank you for reinforcing the idea that you don't get old because you stop playing. You stop playing. You don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing. And as someone in their 60s who still likes to ball out myself in the backyard, I certainly appreciate that. And Maddie, you are an inspiration. Can we give Maddie another round of applause, please? Another individual who has inspired us with his passion for basketball since he arrived in Birmingham just a few short years ago, is today's speaker. Now, I could tell you that Garth Glissman played basketball and football at the University of Nebraska. I could tell you that he has a law degree. I could tell you that he has coached prep football and basketball, that he is, I believe at present, a youth coach, which is one of the best things. If you have not coached kids in the sport of basketball, you are missing out. I miss it terribly. My sons got too old for me to coach them any longer, but that was some of the greatest experiences of my life, was coaching my sons and their friends. If you have that opportunity, I would highly encourage you. So I can tell you all those things about Garth Glissman, and you already know if you go to a basketball game anywhere in the vicinity, and it involves at least one Southeastern Conference team, you will probably see Garth there making the rounds, greeting everyone, spreading the word about SEC basketball as the SEC Associate Commissioner for men's basketball. But I'm going to hit you with some fun facts that have occurred in the SEC, in the sport of basketball, since he became the Associate Commissioner back in the summer of 2023. And during his first season, back in the good old days when the SEC had only 14 schools, 8 of those 14 schools made the NCAA tournament in 2024, 2 advanced to the Sweet 16, 2 advanced to the Elite 8, and for the first time, the University of Alabama advanced to the Final Four. But that was just a warm-up for last year, when, as the SEC expanded to 16 teams, a record 14 of them advanced to the NCAA tournament. A record 7 of them got to the Sweet 16. A record-tying 4 of them advanced to the Elite 8. And 2 of those, of course, were Alabama and Auburn. And 2 of those, Auburn and the University of Florida, got to the Final Four. That was the first time in 11 years that 2 SEC programs advanced that far. It was only the 5th time ever that 2 SEC programs got to the Final Four. And then for the first time since 2012, since Anthony Davis and John Calipari and the Kentucky Wildcats won the national championship, an SEC team lifted the trophy for one shining moment at the Final Four, and it was the University of Florida, the Gators, with their 3rd national championship. Now, coincidence that all this happened since Garth Glissman took the job? I think not. Let's say hello to Garth Glissman.
Thank you, Kevin, for the overly kind introduction. It's always a little bit of a blessing and a curse to follow you because you're so talented that it raises the bar for all subsequent speakers. But I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to be here today. It's a privilege to be back. As Kevin noted, I'm about 2.5 years into my role with the SEC. Grew up in a small farm in Nebraska, never having visited the state of Alabama until I took this job. But our family is so thankful that we made the move to Birmingham and the SEC. The people here are so friendly and welcoming. It's been a great place to raise our kids. And as Kevin noted, I've been able to resurrect my coaching career, this time for my first grade daughter's basketball and soccer teams. Ironically, my soccer record in Birmingham is much better than my basketball record at this point. So thank you for welcoming our family with open arms. The best way for me to repay all of you is to work as hard as I possibly can for the SEC. And on that note, I'll start by recapping what's happened in SEC basketball since our last conversation 1 year ago. As Kevin noted, the 2024-25 SEC men's basketball season was, objectively speaking, the best season for any conference in college basketball history. The one data point that I think is worthy of repeating, Kevin, a second time, is 14 of the 16 SEC teams made the NCAA tournament, shattering the all-time prior record of 11 set by the Big East in 2012. And then we went on to win 23 games in the NCAA tournament, another all-time record, finishing the season as the highest-rated conference in college basketball history, according to KenPom, which, as many of you college basketball enthusiasts know, is the most trusted name in college basketball analytics. But to borrow a line from Coach Shaban, by the time I returned to Birmingham after Florida won the national championship, I already felt like I had fallen behind in my off-season planning. Indeed, it turned out to be a very busy off-season. We had 3 coaching changes, 2 of which directly impacted the state of Alabama. Birmingham legend Bucky McMillan left his hometown and Samford University to take the Texas A&M job. I think it was fitting that if Bucky was going to leave Birmingham, he did so to join the SEC. Bucky's rise to prominence is a compliment to the quality of high school basketball in this state, and Birmingham in particular. And 3 of Bucky's former assistant coaches, when he was the head coach at Mountain Brook High School, are currently head high school coaches in the state of Alabama at Mountain Brook, Coleman, and Huntsville. Sean Miller left Xavier to take the Texas job, bringing with him 487 career wins as a Division I head coach. And Auburn's legendary head coach, Bruce Pearl, who has been so good to me since I joined the SEC, retired in the fall, just days before the start of fall practice, replaced by his son, Steven. Steven is in his first season as head coach, but his 17th season as a part of SEC basketball, either as a player or coach, including the last 11 seasons as an assistant coach at Auburn, where he was a part of the first 2 Final Four teams in Auburn history. Another reason the offseason felt so compressed is because we needed to make significant changes to the playing rules and some officiating mechanics. We heard loud and clear from the fans last year, including some in this room, that there was too much replay. And as a result, games were taking too long. And the fans were right. Officials, in an attempt to get more calls right, had been using replay as a crutch and going to replay far too often, particularly at the end of the games, even when the outcome of those replays did not have an impact on the game. And it was hurting the overall fan experience. I'm pleased to report that in the offseason, the SEC played a leading role at the national level to make numerous changes to the playing rules, bringing about the coach's challenge and other changes to the replay rules and new officiating mechanics, all in an effort to reduce instant replay and improve game flow, particularly at the end of games, and reduce overall game length. We also made some SEC-specific changes, including implementing new timeout clocks located right below the shot clocks in all SEC men's and women's basketball venues to help expedite the administration of timeouts, again, for the purpose of increasing game flow, reducing game length. And as you watch SEC games this season, if you haven't already noticed, I suspect you will, less replay and improved game flow. The schedule is always another big off-season priority for us. We talked about that a little bit last year. Scheduling is the best tool available to a conference office to showcase and grow their product. And we constantly look to improve how we build the conference schedule, because scheduling is a delicate balance on one hand between maximizing fan interest and preserving traditional rivalries, and on the other hand, maintaining competitive fairness within each season's schedule, and then from one season to the next. And to help us in this serious process, we utilize a company, Fast Break AI, that's Fast Break AI for artificial intelligence, which also serves as the top scheduling consultant for every major pro sports league in the United States. And Fast Break offers best-in-class technology, which is important because scheduling at its core is really just a complex math problem that becomes more complicated with each constraint that's programmed into the schedule. And by constraint, I mean we want to start the season off with a bang, so we're going to start with Alabama, Kentucky. We're going to start with Tennessee, Arkansas. We're going to start with Auburn, Georgia. When you program those types of high-profile games into the schedule, it becomes more difficult to accomplish the rest of the schedule. So we're fortunate to partner with Fast Break AI to solve this complicated math problem, and I could share with you deep analytics to suggest that just in my short time at the SEC that our schedule has become objectively better each year that we've built the schedule. Beginning with last season's schedule, we made a point to play the biggest SEC games on Saturdays, which is the best day not only for TV viewership but also the on-campus and fan experience. Now, this may sound obvious to you, but the big games on Saturday approach hadn't been deployed as often as you might think. For example, and I'm sure we have both Alabama and Auburn fans in the room, but you can agree on this, that is a big game. For those two fan bases, that is the biggest game of the year. And last season, both Alabama and Auburn games were played on a Saturday, both games, for the first time since 2016, 2017. So you think nearly a decade since both of those games had been on a Saturday, and it was the third time in the last 15 years that had happened. And the strategy to play that Alabama-Auburn game, both of them on a Saturday, really paid off better than we could have imagined. The initial Alabama versus Auburn game in mid-February turned out to be the first number 1 versus number 2 matchup in SEC men's basketball history. It was also the most watched SEC regular season game since 2019. And the second matchup, which was the last day of the regular season, was the third most watched game of the regular season. We're going to continue that tradition again this year. In fact, we're leaning into it, and with technology and artificial intelligence, we've actually been able to deliver more big games on Saturday. So again, this season's SEC schedule filled with epic matchups on Saturdays, both Alabama-Auburn games and other rivalry games such as Ole Miss versus Mississippi State, Alabama-Tennessee, Florida-Kentucky, and many more. Ultimately, we want our schedule to give fans reason to be excited about SEC basketball. All that passion, all that SEC passion and fandom doesn't need to end when your football team's season is over. We want that passion just to continue right into January, February, and March. Moving along to the results from this season, after last season's dominance, the metrics this season paint a more nuanced picture. The SEC, objectively speaking, is still the deepest conference from top to bottom by most metrics. SEC teams have, on average, the highest net ranking. But in full transparency, both the Big Ten and the Big 12 currently have more teams at the top of the rankings, and at this point in the season are projected to get the majority of the 1 and 2 seeds. At the start of conference play, the SEC was projected to earn 10 NCAA tournament berths this season. That's currently tied for the most with the Big Ten this season. That's according to ESPN's bracketology. The national narrative is that the SEC is down compared to last season, but it's a bit of an unfair comparison when you think of just how dominant last season was. And to put that in perspective, we are currently on track. If we can land the plane and get 10 teams in the tournament this year, that would be the second best season in SEC history. I was looking back at my notes from last year, and maybe it's the Midwesterner in me, but I prefer to kind of under-promise and over-perform. Last year when I spoke to this group in February, I projected that we would get around 12 teams in the NCAA tournament. We ended up with 14, as you know. I don't think we're going to be able to overperform quite to the same degree as this year, but I feel very confident in 9 and would hope to get to 10. Maybe things break a certain way and we could get up to 11, but I think we're probably in that 9 to 10 spot this year, and if we perform in that manner, depending on what happens, have a chance to be the best conference in the country in that category again. We're also the top-ranked conference again in the country this year, according to KenPom, slightly ahead of the Big Ten and the Big 12, based on the gap between us and the second and third conferences. And given that we're now in conference play where everybody's going to be 500 from this point out, it's likely that we'll finish this season as the top-ranked conference in KenPom for the second season in a row. And that uptick in KenPom performance is notable. KenPom's been around for over 30 years, and prior to finishing last season and now being projected to finish this season as the top conference per KenPom, the SEC's average in the prior decade was actually about 4.5. So we were right around, the fourth or fifth best conference in an average year in the decade prior to last year, and now we've been the most dominant conference in college basketball over the last 2 seasons. On to more specific on-court results. Opening day brought plenty of excitement. 8 SEC games. Of those, 2 went to overtime, and another 2 went down to the final seconds of regulation. It was actually, in both of those games, a last-second shot at the buzzer. Both rimmed out, but those we could have had 2-game winners. So 2 games in overtime, 2 regulation games that went down to the last shot. Looking ahead, we have some compelling mid-week matchups starting this week. After getting his first career SEC win on Saturday against LSU, that was one of the games that went down to the last shot, Birmingham native Bucky McMillan returns to his home state to take on Auburn tomorrow night. That's a late game tomorrow night. And then on Wednesday night, Alabama travels to Nashville to take on undefeated Vanderbilt. And if you're not paying attention, Vanderbilt is really strong this year. In fact, that game between Alabama and Vanderbilt will feature the SEC's two highest-ranked teams at this point in the net rankings. Vanderbilt currently ranked 4th in the net. Alabama is 12th. Of course, no conversation about college basketball and college sports in general these days can completely omit mention of NIL, the transfer portal, and now player eligibility. As it currently stands, the NCAA and major conferences such as the SEC are struggling to effectively govern important areas such as player eligibility, player movement, and player compensation. And these challenges are not because the NCAA and folks in positions like mine think that the current landscape is the ideal way to run college sports. It's because of various lawsuits brought on antitrust grounds effectively have made it impossible to enact and ultimately enforce rules. As the latest example, on Christmas Eve, and I got a phone call from an unnamed high-profile SEC head coach on Christmas Eve as I was driving my family back from church in tiny rural Nebraska to discuss this matter. The NCAA on Christmas Eve issued a groundbreaking decision by granting not just eligibility, but 4 years of NCAA eligibility to James Nnaji, who notably was the 31st overall pick in the 2023 NBA draft. To put that in perspective, that's the first pick of the second round. So that's a relatively high pick. The NBA draft only has 2 rounds. First pick of the second round, over 2 years ago. Granted 4 years of eligibility starting from now. He's already played a game for Baylor. The NCAA's decision in this particular matter appears to be predicated on the fact, I say appears because it's not as though they issue some formal judicial opinion, so you get to follow all the logic. But the decision appears to be predicated on the fact that although Nnaji was selected in the NBA draft, he never signed an NBA contract, never played in an NBA game, and he has been playing professionally in Europe since being selected in the draft 2 years ago. To be clear, I strongly disagree with this decision. Despite all the chaos in college athletics in recent years, in my personal view, the NCAA's decision on Nnaji sets the most dangerous eligibility-related precedent to date. In my estimation, the ramifications from the Nnaji eligibility ruling and the players that likely will follow in his footsteps accelerate the path towards structural reform, either through some form of congressional intervention. We can debate what the key elements of that would be, but some form of congressional intervention, or some other legal structure that resembles the structure in pro sports leagues. Unfortunately, until one of those developments occur, college sports will continue to suffer from structural instability and the inability to meaningfully regulate player movement, player compensation, and player eligibility. Moving from one controversial topic to another, and as I was walking in this late this morning, it's now afternoon, I was rightfully heckled by some folks in the crowd about whether I was going to more effectively address officiating in this year's conversation. So I was getting heckled on one moment, and by the way, understandably so. I didn't handle that topic the best last year. But as that was happening, Margaret, who I met walking in, she was kind enough to bring me a plate of food. So I thought, this is pretty consistent with my SEC experience. Incredible Southern hospitality and catching flack about the officiating almost in the same moment. But in all seriousness, I hope that everyone in this room understands how seriously we take officiating at the conference office. This topic generated some passionate questions from this group last year, And I want to do the best I can to kind of put you into my frame of mind in terms of how we prepare our officials and then how we monitor and ultimately evaluate our officials. Every preseason in September, I have the privilege to meet with, on 2 separate occasions with the SEC men's basketball officials. And I remind the group every year of what I believe is truly a sacred duty to facilitate fair and equal competition so that ultimately the best teams, players, and coaches can rise to the top. That is our sacred duty. I also remind our officials that at a macro level, Americans increasingly have lost trust in many of our social institutions, whether it be government, politicians, other people in positions of power. And trust me, I get it. Trust me, this is not a political speech. But I will tell you that on a personal level, it saddens me that many fans, sports fans, college and pro, see the conference office or in pro sports league office and their officials in the same light as they see so many of our public institutions for whom there is gradually declining trust. Amidst this backdrop, it is more important than ever before that people like me in the conference office and SEC officials operate at the highest level of integrity. That means officiating every game without regard to the team, the coach, the score, the fans, or any other external circumstances. And what I've told our officials each time I've met with them is that I love living in the South. There's so much to like about Birmingham and this job, but I will go back to Nebraska happily before I compromise 1 ounce of my integrity. We're not playing games. We're not playing favorites. We're going to call it as we see it, call it right down the middle. And I thought that's what somebody in my position should do. I thought that's the type of preseason remarks that should be delivered in the normal course. But every time officials, whether they're SEC primary officials or maybe we invite a Big Ten official over, they pull me aside after the fact and they say, you have no idea how much that means to me, because we don't typically get that type of messaging. And we appreciate that you have our back. So the instruction to our officials is you go call it fair, and then let me handle the fallout. We'll let the chips fall where they may. As part of our responsibility at the conference office, we continually refine our systems and processes to optimize officiating performance. And you would be pleased to know the data in this context. Our coordinator of officials is Mike Eads, a well-regarded official on the floor in his own right before he came over to the SEC. He was primarily an ACC official, now leads all SEC officiating. The quality has improved immensely since he took over. Last year, 23 SEC primary officials, I use the term SEC primary officials because we do have some secondary officials who come in from other conferences and officiate our games from time to time as their schedule allows, but 23 SEC primary officials worked the 2025 NCAA tournament. It's an independent body that makes that determination, so it's not like we're grooving our officials into the tournament. 23 officials last year compared to 16 in the tournament preceding Mike Eads' tenure. That's a 44% increase in the number of NCAA tournament officials in roughly 5 years, thanks to Mike Eads' leadership. In the 2025 NCAA tournament, the SEC led all conferences with 11 SEC officials in the second round or beyond, 9 SEC primary officials in the Sweet 16 or beyond, and we had 3 SEC officials in the Final Four or national championship game. That group included longtime SEC official Doug Shows, Courtney Green, who recently joined the SEC from the Big Ten, and Terry Oglesby, who worked his 4th consecutive national championship game. Now, interestingly, if you're a real college basketball junkie, you know that Terry Oglesby has recently retired from on-court officiating, stepped down from his role as an SEC on-court official to take the job as the coordinator of officials for the Big Ten. That job came open this fall. Sadly, the prior coordinator for the Big Ten, Terry Weimer, passed away unexpectedly. Terry Oglesby was a good friend of Terry Weimer. Those jobs don't come open very often, and Terry felt like it was the right time after having worked 4 consecutive national championship games to transition into administration. So just as legendary coaches retire and players go on to the NBA and exhaust their eligibility, we have to deal with those same succession planning scenarios in the SEC. So replacing Terry will be tough, but we feel like we have the depth to do it. Behind the scenes here in Birmingham, we also incorporate independent game reviewers to analyze the officiating performance and the call in each SEC game. We utilize proprietary analytics and a leading artificial intelligence model to help analyze officiating performance and trends. I've been spending a lot of my time studying AI and how to deploy enterprise AI. The reality for enterprise AI is it's only as good as your proprietary data. And so we've made a really concerted effort in the last 12 to 18 months to get more and more data, particularly in the officiating context. And we're deploying that data with some best-in-class consultants, which I'll get to momentarily, and leading AI models to inform our officiating evaluation and identifying trends. And I'll tell you, when you have good data, the insights can really be insightful. And that technology is only going to continue to improve in the years to come. We also survey all SEC head coaches to ensure that their perspectives inform our evaluation of SEC officials. That's a tactic that I utilized or that I learned and took from the NBA. That's not something that was commonplace in the SEC before I arrived, but we've incorporated it. Our our head coaches have really leaned into it, and it's made us better in terms of officiating assignments and evaluation. We also, in the midst of not only implementing, but increasing integrity-related education and monitoring. You think about all of the threats to game-related integrity. In the last year alone, we've had indictments of NBA players and coaches and Major League Baseball players. So you can never educate enough on the importance of game-related integrity. And so just in the last few weeks, we've rolled out even more initiatives in that space. And we also launched a game integrity reporting hotline so that any SEC stakeholder, player, coach, staff member, or referee can anonymously submit a game integrity-related complaint or ask for help, either anonymously or by submitting their names. And I promise you that in each of these areas, we constantly look to improve and innovate as we go. I mentioned that I'm new to Birmingham. I think the number one way that I can honor all of you is to work really hard on the SEC's behalf. And that's really where my mind is. I don't have any hobbies. I don't golf. It's work. It's family. It's all SEC for me. But I'm also someone who believes in learning about and embracing where you are. And so I've really tried to learn about and become a part of the Birmingham community. And so before I conclude today, I want to highlight some Birmingham area people and companies that are doing very important work in college basketball. You all know Martin Newton. Martin deserves enormous credit for having the courage to hire a high school coach from Mountain Brook and make him the head coach at Samford University. It's not often you see the high school to Division I head coaching jump directly, but that move paid off. Bucky had 4 straight 20-win seasons and took Samford to its first NCAA tournament since 2000. Both the SEC and Texas A&M owe Martin a debt of gratitude. And as another and probably even more impressive testament to Martin's basketball credentials, he currently serves as the vice chair of the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee. And next year, by virtue of being the chair this year, he will ascend into the role of chair of the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee, a very prestigious role. And Martin will become the second Birmingham area resident to hold that role in the last 4 years, following Charles McClellan, who served in that role for the 2024 NCAA tournament and continues to serve effectively as the commissioner of the SWAC based here in Birmingham. HD Intelligence. I think some of you may have heard of this company, maybe somebody in particular in this audience, a data analytics and consulting company with Alabama ties doing high-level work in college basketball and beyond. HD Intelligence was founded by 2 Alabama natives, Colton Houston from Mountain Brook, still living in Mountain Brook, and Matt Dover from Jasper, Alabama. Both Matt and Colton have become trusted business partners and good friends of mine. As of this morning, the plan was for Colton's dad to be in attendance today. I don't want to put him on the spot, but Mr. Houston, are you here anywhere? There you are. Mr. Houston, I know you're very proud of your son, as you should be. And for those of you who aren't familiar with HD Intelligence's work, In recent years, the company has served as the top outside analytics company, and that essentially means, advising the coach on how many threes should you shoot, what are the optimal lineups, when a player picks up a second foul in the first half, should you sit him, pull him out, all of those types of data-driven decisions. HD Intelligence serves as the outside consultant for teams across the country, including UConn's back-to-back national championship teams in 2023 and 24, Florida's national championship team in 2025, and most impressively, the USA Basketball senior national team gold medal team from the 2024 Olympics in Paris. HD Intelligence was actually embedded with Team USA in Paris in the summer of 2024. I can't take any credit for finding HD Intelligence. That relationship with the SEC predated my time, but I am proud to say that in the last year, we have substantially increased the scope of our relationship with HD Intelligence to include several new verticals, including officiating data and analytics, integrity monitoring, and player availability reporting. In fact, for those of you who follow this stuff really closely, you'll know that about a year or so ago, the SEC was a pioneer in player availability reporting, often referred to as injury reporting. We implemented that policy a year ago. This academic year, the CFP has adopted the SEC's policy, and because we partner with HD Intelligence on that, the CFP, College Football Playoff, is also utilizing HD Intelligence for their data analytics and software platform for all injury reporting for the College Football Playoff. And not long thereafter, the NCAA adopted the same policy and procedures and HD Intelligence as well to do that for the first time in the NCAA men's and women's basketball tournaments beginning in the spring of 2026. Also want to highlight Birmingham-based company Knight Eady. A well-known local company brings several high-profile men's and women's basketball games to Birmingham each year. Birmingham is a great sports town, as many of you know, but even by great sports town standards, we are spoiled in terms of the high-quality basketball games, both exhibition games and non-conference games that come to this city every year, and nobody deserves more credit for that than Knight Eady. It's a team effort over there, and they're such unassuming and humble people that nobody wants to take any credit, but I'm going to name a few people today. I get the privilege to work closely with three folks over there on the men's basketball side, in particular, Michael Eady, co-founder, president of the company, Chris Nix. Chris, you're actually joining us today. Chris is a senior executive there, works in development, very close relationships across the Southeastern Conference and the conference office as well. Chris, thanks for all you do, and of course, your colleague, Preston Kirk, very involved in men's basketball as well. And Knight Eady, and again, I mentioned being new to the South, but I think they embody the best of Birmingham and Southern values, and that not only do they bring big events to this city, high-level college basketball to this city on a regular basis, but they're doing it with big brands, big teams, and they do it all with incredible integrity, class, humility, and Southern hospitality. Not once has Chris or any of his colleagues yelled at me when I called him last minute to ask for more tickets. They're always so welcoming. And in my defense, it's not like I'm usually calling and asking for tickets for my wife and kids. It's like, hey, last second, Commissioner Sankey's in town. Can you get him a seat? So they've always delivered. I've never tried to abuse the privilege, but Chris, thanks for your partnership and all you do. Last but not least, my friend Ram Kirpalani at Hong Kong Tailors in Homewood. Ram, as many of you know, dresses numerous SEC head coaches, both past and present, including Wimp Sanderson, Nate Oates, Bruce, and Stephen Pearl. I mean, Ram might be the only guy to be able to do business with both Nate and the Pearls. You know, he is like the ultimate peacekeeper. And he also dresses Kalen DeBoer. This is the tip-off club, but, we extend into football every now and then. It is Alabama after all. Ram has helped me embrace some Southern style, which is, a little different for a more subdued Midwesterner. This is probably more Nebraska style today than it is Southern style, but Ram, I'm slowly evolving thanks to Ram. So wrapping things up, all of you, if time permits, I know we'll have some thought-provoking questions. You had some tough ones last year, but I want you to know that we're going to do everything we possibly can to keep pushing the boundaries of what is expected in SEC basketball. Our job is to serve all of the stakeholders, continue to elevate the trajectory of SEC basketball. I view my job as a service-oriented role, to serve you, to serve all of our fans. We welcome your feedback. I mentioned some of the rule changes this year that came in part from a lot of the criticism that we got from fans, and fans were exactly right. We'll continue to listen, learn, and improve from one season to the next. In return, I would ask each of you to get your friends and family excited about SEC basketball. It's a compelling product. Go to games if you can, and if you can't get to the games, watch us on TV. The SEC, it's this beautiful contrast that on one hand, we are this iconic, tradition-rich conference, yet SEC basketball is still very much a growth story. I'm thankful to be in Birmingham, thankful to be with all of you, and thankful to be a part of the SEC's journey. With that, time permitting, Mr. President, I'm happy to take any questions. Well, I talked to Commissioner Sankey this morning. He knew I was here today, and with those questions, you're really putting me right on the hot seat. Those are all the right questions. Let me try to unpack them. So, the House settlement was billed as transformational in college athletics, and it is fair to say that it has been transformational. There's two aspects of the House settlement, which has. There's still some procedural wrangling, but in effect, the settlement has been approved. There's two aspects to the House settlement. One is the backward-looking damages, where prior student athletes who didn't have a right to earn NIL-related money were suing for back damages. So that's money that's going to go out the door to former student athletes. And then there's a forward-looking element to it as well that essentially allowed schools to pay student athletes directly, subject to certain caps that's adjusted on an annual basis. So the settlement has been approved. The back damages are currently in limbo based on some appeals, but even as recently as this morning, passed another procedural checkpoint that makes it a little more likely that those back damages will be paid relatively soon, or at least we've gotten closer to that. So we extinguished some backward-looking liability, which has incredible importance because there was some concern that the liability had grown so large that perhaps it was an existential threat to college athletics. So it served a valid purpose of extinguishing potentially existential backward-looking liability. As it relates to going forward, the settlement essentially offered a framework of sorts for athletic departments to operate in, but the settlement by itself cannot create new antitrust law, nor can it create antitrust exemptions. So the settlement itself and the rules enacted in the aftermath of the settlement remain subject to antitrust challenges in courts. And it's those antitrust challenges that have made it exceedingly difficult for the NCAA and conferences to meaningfully regulate those three areas I touched on earlier: player movement, player compensation, and player eligibility. So all of the rules going forward are still subject to potential and ongoing antitrust lawsuits. I'm not stating an opinion as to which path is most likely or preferred. I think it's important that the SEC speak with one voice as it relates to the path forward, and that voice is my boss, Commissioner Sankey. But as a legal matter, I would observe that based on, and I am a lawyer, went back home for the holidays to make sure I kept my law license active in my home state for another year. So based on all the legal commentary that I'm aware of, there's really only two mechanisms to try to create some type of antitrust immunity. One is congressional intervention, and that's what was trying to be accomplished through the SCORE Act. And then the second, as you mentioned, is collective bargaining, which has a lot of nuance to it, and it's a very politically sensitive concept. But the reality is, absent one of those two developments, meaning some type of congressional intervention and or some type of bargaining that in some way, shape, or form resembles what happens in pro sports leagues, those are the two pathways. And right now in college athletics, there's robust debate as to which of those pathways or both should be pursued. And there's a lot of healthy debate, but ultimately, again, I want to be deferential to my boss, Commissioner Sankey. I think it's fair to say that the SEC's position thus far has been that Congress needs to act, and that was the impetus for all that led up to the SCORE Act, which ultimately, before the holidays, fell a little short, and the piece of legislation was pulled from the House floor before a vote.
Next is John, and we will have time for one more. Any hands for a question following John? Right over here against the wall.
Well, first I want to thank you for noting that fan interest in the SEC is at incredible levels. Both fan interest is manifested in TV viewership and attendance at games. And we're incredibly fortunate that in this part of the country, we have a lot of demographic trends in our favor, combined with the fact that folks just love college athletics. Hence the slogan, it just means more. So last year in basketball, we were the most watched conference, which is, to my knowledge, the first time on record that's happened in the SEC. So TV viewership for basketball was better than ever in our conference last year. Football this past season, we're just coming off of a dominant stretch in terms of TV viewership. This is not an exaggeration to say that SEC football is the second most watched and second most valuable media property in all of North America, behind only the NFL. The NFL is in a league of its own, but the SEC has established itself as a clear number two, even ahead of my former employer, the NBA, and ahead of Major League Baseball. So the numbers suggest that fan interest and attendance for SEC football and basketball is incredibly high. And I think it's important to note that because there is some disillusionment with the structural state of college athletics, but it hasn't diminished from the fan interest in the game. Now, to answer your specific question as it relates to analytics and home court advantage, we do look at that to some extent. Feel like I'm an advertisement for KenPom, but KenPom actually ranks which schools have the greatest home court advantage. From time to time, I'll hear some criticism from a head coach that, not all away games are the same, and I can't believe that you gave me this away game and this stretch based on other aspects of the schedule. And of course, everything balances out analytically, and so we're comfortable with the totality of the schedule that we hand out. But that is something that we monitor. It can be difficult to deliver perfect equity in that respect, because one of the challenges that we have in college athletics right now is that conferences have expanded in number, but for the most part, we're still playing roughly the same number of conference games, and conferences, for the most part, have gone away from divisional formats based on the business judgment that if you're going to form a new conference, then we should have some interconnectedness between all the teams in the conference. And if you isolate one division from the other, a school like Texas and Oklahoma may not feel like it's in the same conference as Georgia and Alabama, and they want to feel that connectedness. The downside to that is it creates inherently unequal schedules, because not every schedule is the same. There's no way that you can create a perfectly equal schedule, for example, in SEC football, if you have a 16-team league and you're only playing 8 games or 9 games next year, or in the case of basketball, 18 league games where every team plays one team once and then 3 teams twice. So the answer to your question is we do track those numbers. Our coaches use it for recruiting purposes. so that players know how many fans are coming to their games, because players love playing in our iconic venues. And so we're aware of it, but there's some limitations to what we can do from a scheduling standpoint based on the other constraints that I just mentioned. Last question. It's a great question, and I actually have spent a lot of time educating our coaches on that. They now know it, and then after we got our coaches up to speed on it, spent a lot of time educating ESPN on it. And to ESPN's credit, they've done a really good job of educating the viewers. This is one of those aspects of college athletics where if you started from scratch, you probably wouldn't have a system where you have a coach's appeal and a coach's challenge, because it would be very confusing to the fans. So let me try to unpack it for you. The coach's challenge is an entirely new rule that we helped usher in that is a variation of the coach's challenge rule that I actually wrote when I was at the NBA league office. The difference between the coach's challenge and the NBA and college primarily is that the coach's challenge in the NBA allows for called fouls to be challenged, and that is not the case with the coach's challenge in college basketball. So the coach's challenge in college basketball allows teams, at the risk of a timeout, to initiate review of a called out of bounds, called goaltending, or called restricted area play. If your first challenge is successful, you get a second. If your first challenge is unsuccessful, you lose your right to challenge for the rest of the game. If your first challenge is successful, you get your timeout back. If your second challenge is successful, you get your timeout back, but you don't get another challenge. That's an entirely new rule. This is year one of that rule on the books. The principal objective of the coach's challenge is to try to limit the number of out-of-bounds reviews at the end of games, because if you watch college basketball in recent years, you know that by default, literally every single out-of-bounds call at the end of games ended up in instant replay. And that is not a good place to be for the overall fan experience. So the coach's challenge is intended primarily to solve that problem. The coach's appeal is, I actually am more proud of what the SEC did around the coach's appeal than the challenge, because that was actually subject to more abuse and had a more detrimental effect on game flow and length than anything else. So the rule book, and it's been on the books for a while, long before I came into college athletics, allowed for coaches to essentially request that the referees look for or go to replay on certain types of plays. The best example is a potential flagrant foul, and there's many other examples as well. The rule book, when that rule was written, said that if the referees weren't going to go on their own to go look at a potential flagrant foul, and the head coach requested it, that the referee had discretion to charge the requesting team with a timeout if the request did not result in the call being upgraded. So picture the scenario. Coach thinks there was a flagrant foul. We can pick on Chad Baker-Mazzaro. He's not in the conference anymore. Coach thinks Chad Baker-Mazzaro committed a flagrant foul. Refs didn't see anything. Coach says, come on, it's Chad Baker-Mazzaro. You got to go to the monitor. Referees go to the monitor. In the past, even though the rule said that the referees should charge a timeout if that didn't result in an upgrade, the referees, for game management tactics and to essentially avoid picking a fight with the coach, they were just going to the monitor whenever the coaches asked them, because their incentives were to try to get the call right, preserve their relationship with their coach. They weren't trying to pick any unnecessary fights. So what we did this year, and this is what I learned when I was at the NBA, you can actually impact the game more through officiating points of emphasis than you can changing the rules as written. So we changed the officiating points of emphasis and basically told the national coordinator of officials, hey, here's how we're going to handle it in the SEC. We'd love it if you'd join forces with us, and we have a good relationship with that gentleman, and we had a good feeling that he would be on board with it. But we really took the lead in the SEC, and ultimately he did partner with us, such that now if a coach appeals for a flagrant foul or a clock review or some other type of review, but those are the most common, is potential flagrant foul, clock review, and it turns out the request it does not result in an upgrade, we tell our officials, you better charge that coach with a timeout. Now, we're still not perfect in that area, and in an unnamed SEC game on opening day, there was a referee who let me down and didn't follow his training. And so we'll continue to message that because did the coach ask for it or not? We've given the referees clear parameters to help them make that determination. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity for you, but I will acknowledge that if you were to write the rules from scratch today, you wouldn't have an appeal system and a challenge system. You'd try to marry the two and have one concept that makes sense.
A great beginning of our 52nd season. I want to thank Dick Coffey for handing out his you've got to have his review for every sports season. I cannot wait for the water polo one. Next week the brick and ball contest will be back. You'll be getting the little forms in the email later this week to send in. And remember, those bricks have to be returned. You cannot make a barbecue out of them. And let's see, what else do I have? Oh, next week, Lenny Acuff will be our speaker. And I wanted to leave y'all with one thought. As the NCAA keeps saying that you can come back after NBA draft, I'm just extrapolating a little bit here. LeBron has 4 years left. Bronny has 3. Finally, they may get to play together. Thank y'all for coming. See y'all next week.